Hello, welcome to a series I honestly thought I had canceled, but here we are. Talking about the new Primus song. Now, I'm doing this partially because I love Primus, and partially because I had no videos for you over the summer, and I'm sorry about that. A lot of bad stuff happened to me this summer. I had a beloved family pet die really unexpectedly. I had my car wrecked by a tree in the middle of a storm while I was driving it. And it was just not good. So I didn't have a whole lot of energy, and what I had I was using to sort of rediscover my love for the visual arts. I went back to drawing. I've been a visual artist far longer than I've been a video maker. I guess that's what I'm going to call myself. I'm not going to call myself a filmmaker. I'm not that pretentious. But I'm sorry about that. And so to make up for that, I'm going to make some videos for you. I'm working on the second episode of the Jam mini review set. I'm finishing up a review by a patron on Patreon, which, by the way, I have a Patreon. If you want to see me review something, you feel like supporting my channel, the link's in the description. Go do that. Be my guest. And I have a Frank Zappa episode, top 10 albums to listen to first for Frank Zappa. So there's an unboxing I think I'm gonna do. You know, tell me if you're interested in that. If you would like to see me do an unboxing, respond in the comments likewise. Now, the actual Primus song. What do I think about it? Well, first of all, I like it. I like it a lot. My expectations are up here now. You know, they were always gonna be pretty high because, you know, I didn't particularly care for the covers album. You know, I think that it would have been fun to have Primus cover a couple of those songs or do an EP of it, but to cover the whole soundtrack made me raise my eyebrow a little bit. You know, there was great stuff on there. I loved the song where Larry Lalonde sings, but overall was not a big fan. But Green Naugahyde was fantastic. And the Claypool Lennon Delirium album was fantastic. Really, really dark. Probably the darkest thing, Claypool-related thing I've heard. Because Pork Soda gets pretty bleak, but it's kind of a drugged out darkness, not a we're going to talk about really, really depressing stuff. But my expectations are high. As for the song itself, I'm just going to get this out of the way completely. It sounds like Primus doing King Crimson, because that first bit with the sounds totally like Primus. It sounds like Seas of Cheese or maybe even Frizzle Fry era Primus. You know, it reminds me of something like Here Comes that kind of lumbering stomp. But then it goes into the diddle 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 do diddle diddle diddle, and that's King Crimson. That's early 80s Discipline beat, Three of a Perfect Pair, Adrian Belew era King Crimson. And I gotta say, it made me feel vindicated because I've always been telling people, I've been saying Larry Lalonde reminds me of Robert Fripp. And people will always be like, no, Robert Fripp is way better, which he is, but people will look at me like I've grown three heads, and I think it's probably because they're thinking of, like, Court of the Crimson King Robert Fripp, or Heroes Robert Fripp, or, you know, I have a friend I have a friend who does not like Primus, and I want to make it clear that I don't agree with him. I really like Primus, but he was ranting to me about them one day. He's like, they don't have their own identity. They just sound like other bands. They sound like they ripped off the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Residents, and King Crimson all at once. And while I don't agree with him at all, you know, as I say in my own Primus reviews, because I've been doing a written series on them, Primus are very much, they sound like the people who they are influenced by. They don't necessarily bring an enormous amount of new stuff to the table. You know, they sound like the people who they are influenced by. And I've never cared about that. You know, I'm not the kind of person who thinks that every band, every album, it has to be original. It has to be something nobody's ever done before. You know, I even said to the guy in our argument, I said, yeah, but nobody put those things together before. You know, it's, to my knowledge, nobody said, I'm going to sing like the Residents and play my bass like, you know, I'm going to play my bass like Geddy Lee and John Entwistle, and our guitarist's going to sound like Robert Fripp, and the drummer's going to be doing like Stuart Copeland-y kind of Neil Pearty stuff. Which is the other thing I'm really, really excited for. I'm really, really happy to have Tim Alexander back as the drummer, because he is the best drummer that they have had. You know, Jay Lane is great. Brain I like, but I like him as a drummer, but he drummed during the period where the band was just kind of off. You know, I'm surprised I haven't gotten more hate in my Anti-Pop and Brown album reviews, because they both kind of communicate that I really don't much care for the later kind of later 90s era of Primus. You know, Brain is a good drummer. He just drummed during the phase of the band that I don't really care for, so it's hard for me to say much about him. And apparently this album is a concept album, which I gotta say I'm very interested to hear. It's a children's book that I'm not familiar with. You know, I'm not familiar with the Rainbow Goblins at all. It's actually the first I've heard about that, you know. It definitely makes me curious to see what the rest of the album is going to be like, though. But it's great that Tim Alexander's back, because I know that at least ever since I listened to the Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People EP for the first time, I have been really, really wanting for him to come back, because for those of you who haven't listened to that EP, that's a fantastic EP. And it's just great that he's back. I don't really have much more to say besides that. You can expect to see more videos from me in the future. And leave in the comments any suggestions, because I'll be happy to read them.